State your purpose. The alien steward's voice cracked with disinterest as he scanned the tall human standing at the chamber's threshold. Marin Durek shifted his weight forward, his dark boots leaving faint streaks across the polished marble. Observer status, Earth delegation, he replied evenly, his breath clouding faintly in the cool air of the council hall. The steward gave a dismissive wave, metal staff tapping once against the floor as he turned away, already losing interest. Durek stepped forward, his senses absorbing the council's atmosphere. The bronze and cobalt marble stretched in geometric patterns beneath his feet, each line an echo of order crafted to impress. Cold air carried the scent of old stone and distant rain, the faint tang of dust from the council's neglected archives. Alien voices drifted around him, sharp consonants, layered inflections, each tone carrying centuries of diplomatic dance. Durek's hand brushed the edge of his thin, leather-bound notebook, fingers lingering on the crisp surface as he scanned the rows of alien delegates. He paused at the threshold, letting the full weight of the chamber settle onto his shoulders. Across the wide dais, the Valari delegation sat in silent ranks, their curved helms polished to a dull sheen that reflected the muted glow of overhead laser plasma displays. Their eyes tracked him with detached curiosity, as though he were a minor ripple in the calm of their empire. The council's chair, an aging Theron official whose six-fingered hands rested on a carved staff, gave a slight nod of greeting. No warmth, no welcome. Durek moved to the unadorned steel plaque marked Earth Observer. It was a seat without power, a position of symbolic courtesy. He set his notebook down with quiet deliberation, the faint scuff of leather on metal drawing a single glance from the Valari envoy. Envoy Durek, Earth, he murmured, more to himself than to them, the words an anchor in the shifting tide of alien scrutiny. A low chorus of voices rose as the council's herald announced the opening of the Valari annexation hearings. The council's banners, crimson, indigo, and slate gray, hung heavy in the air, each one bearing the glyphs of ancient treaties. Durek listened as the Valari envoy began his opening statement, a rhythmic flow of conquest and justification that dripped with old arrogance. The envoy's voice was smooth, each word measured, yet Durek saw the faint gleam in the alien's eyes, certainty that Earth's seat was nothing more than a formality. He watched the other delegates exchange small gestures, flicks of wrist, narrowing of eyes, silent signals that spoke louder than words. The council chamber was a theater of power, and Earth had long played the silent observer, sending reports, offering no challenge. Durek remembered every line of those reports, each carefully worded phrase of polite compliance, each silent bow to decisions made far from human soil. The envoy's speech ended with a thin smile. Earth has no standing claim, the Valari representative concluded, his gaze flicking to Durek with a trace of scorn. No challenge will be recognized. A ripple of amusement moved through the chamber. Alien ambassadors leaned back in their seats, voices dropping to mocking murmurs. Earth's silence is confirmation, one of them whispered in a soft dialect, the words slipping like oil across the council's cold floor. Durek's eyes moved steadily across the chamber, each alien face captured in a quiet catalog of memory. He said nothing. Instead, he opened his notebook, the soft crack of the spine drawing more attention than any protest might have. His pen moved with calm purpose, each line capturing not only the words spoken, but the weight behind them. The smug curl of the Valari envoy's mouth, the bored flick of the council chair's hand. He felt the brush of air from the ceiling vents, cool drafts stirring the edge of his coat. The chamber's scent was a blend of wet stone and distant spice, a reminder that this was not Earth's domain. Yet he felt no unease. Each word spoken by the council was a brushstroke in a painting he had studied for decades, and Earth's place in that painting was not what these delegates assumed. The council chair spoke, voice carrying the brittle patience of an ancient order. Earth retains observer status. No formal claim. We proceed with the hearings. The chair's staff tapped once, a sound that echoed through the marble and carried the weight of authority. Durek inclined his head, a slow, deliberate motion that spoke of patience honed across years of diplomatic retreat. Around him, the alien delegates resumed their quiet conversations. The council's aides moved with practiced indifference, heads bent over heads-up displays that flickered with shifting data. The faint aroma of spiced bark drifted from a nearby envoy's ceremonial incense, curling around Durek's senses as he closed his notebook. He did not speak, did not protest. He listened. Whispers moved like water across the chamber. Earth's envoy, quiet as always. They will file their reports and vanish. No threat, no voice. Each phrase slipped past Durek's ears and into his mind, stored and weighed. His calm was not born of ignorance. It was the patience of a hunter who knew the path to the kill. His eyes drifted to the council's engraved ceiling, a map of the known sectors etched in silver filigree. Each star marked a system claimed, each line of trade a promise of stability. Beneath that map, the council believed itself eternal. Durek traced the edges of his notebook, feeling the faint ridges of embossed lines beneath his fingertips. Lines that mirrored the council's map, but with a different story. A memory flickered in his mind. Earth's past hearings, each one a lesson in dismissal. He remembered the cold conference rooms of alien embassies, the clipped replies to human envoys, the quiet certainty that Earth was too small, too scattered to matter. He remembered, and he smiled. A small, secret smile that never reached his lips. As the council's herald called for the next statement, Durek's hand stilled. He felt the tremor in the air, an echo of power unspoken. Earth had sent him not to speak, but to see, to watch, to remember. Each breath he took carried the weight of that mandate, and in that silence Earth was preparing something none of these delegates could see. The final note of the herald's voice faded. The council's eyes turned back to the Valari envoy, already bored with Earth's presence. Durek closed his notebook with a soft click, his breath steady as the stone walls that surrounded him. He said nothing, yet in his mind each word spoken had already been measured, each slight catalogued, each smug assumption marked for the day when Earth would no longer remain silent. And so he sat, the observer seat cold beneath him, the leather of his notebook smooth beneath his hand. Outside the council chamber, distant thunder rolled across alien skies. Inside, the air held its breath, waiting for the moment when silence would no longer be mistaken for surrender. Marin Durek watched the chamber with the quiet intensity of a man whose mind was already elsewhere. The council's herald announced the next agenda, and the Valari envoy rose once more, his voice a smooth current of arrogance as he outlined the new blockade measures. Charts flickered across alien desks, each trade route reduced to a line, each colony reduced to a number. The chamber's air grew stale with the weight of calculated indifference. Durek's fingers traced the cover of his closed notebook. Beneath that stillness, his thoughts churned. Outside the council's ornate walls, Earth's colonies choked under Valari restrictions. Data lines were severed, supply routes twisted into knots. Cargo that once flowed freely now sat locked in orbital warehouses, waiting for clearances that would never come. He shifted in his seat, leaning forward as he activated a small transponder embedded in the seam of his coat. A soft click beneath his palm, inaudible to those around him, signaled a transmission already en route to Earth's trade coordinators. His voice, low and steady, carried through the secure link. "Initiate Order Meridian 7, he said. His breath fogged faintly in the chill of the chamber, words clipped but resolute. The council continued its performance, voices raised in arguments of sovereignty and security. Durek let the noise wash over him. His thoughts moved along different channels. Contracts signed decades ago, clauses that lay dormant like seeds in frozen soil. Now those seeds would awaken. On Earth, trade hubs lit up with commands. Port controllers, long used to quiet commerce, began rerouting registries. Arbitration link accounts were flagged for review, their credits locked in place as centuries-old subclauses flickered to life. In the glass halls of Earth's commerce offices, data streams crackled under the weight of old promises. No alarms sounded, no proclamations made, only silent shifts in the currents of commerce. Durek's gaze moved across the chamber to the council's data analysts. Their eyes darted across their heads-up displays, confusion creeping into their movements. Graphs shifted unpredictably, trade logs no longer aligning with the neat patterns they trusted. One alien scribe adjusted his collar, throat tight as he whispered to a colleague. "System errors or sabotage?" The question hung in the air, a faint tremor that no one wanted to acknowledge. Valari envoys exchanged glances, irritation seeping into their composed facades. They had expected Earth to watch in silent acceptance. Instead, the chamber now bore the weight of an invisible lever, one that Durek had already begun to pull. A delegate from the VAR consortium leaned forward, voice edged with concern. "There are whispers, frozen escrow accounts, missing cargo certifications. Is Earth involved?" The council chair raised a tired hand. "Trade disruptions are common in disputes," he said, but his eyes shifted to Durek with a flicker of unease. Durek gave no outward sign of acknowledgement. He only tapped the edge of his notebook, a quiet rhythm that spoke more clearly than any denial. Each tap marked a treaty Earth had once signed in good faith. Each line of commerce now a thread in a net that wrapped around the council's throat. Outside the chamber, freighters drifted in the void, their cargo holds full, their paths locked by invisible codes. The captains' voices, carried across secured channels, crackled with urgency. "We're at a standstill. All routes redirected. Who holds the keys?" In the silence that followed, they knew the answer. Back in the council hall, the Valari envoy's voice sharpened. "Earth's silence is complicity," he declared, words tight with frustration. "They hide behind observer status while they sow discord." The accusation drew a ripple of agreement from lesser delegates, but Durek did not rise to it. His eyes remained steady, his breathing even. Earth's allies, minor species whose names rarely graced council decrees, sat straighter in their seats, their own trade representatives aware that the silent recalibration served them as well. Treaties they had once signed at Earth's urging now formed a quiet alliance of necessity. Durek's hand moved again, sending a second transmission. In Earth's trade ministry, cargo registries locked down fully, entire sectors of goods frozen by clauses written in overlooked paragraphs of old treaties. Earth's calm had never been surrender. It had been the quiet collection of leverage. A Valari official rose to speak, his robes whispering across the polished floor as he approached the dais. "You dare to manipulate the council's commerce?" His voice was a low snarl, the weight of empire behind each word. Durek raised his gaze, eyes meeting the aliens with unflinching calm. "I enforce the terms long agreed upon," he said, softly. His voice did not rise, yet it cut through the hall like a cold blade. Silence followed, heavy and absolute. Around them, the laser plasma displays flickered with trade updates that no longer aligned. Delegates shifted uncomfortably, the scent of old parchment and fresh ink mingling in the chamber's recycled air. Durek closed his notebook with a soft thud, the final note of Earth's quiet answer to the council's disdain. A council aide, face pale beneath green skin, leaned close to the chair. 3 major sectors report disruptions. Third-party audits confirm Earth's trade subroutines are the source. The chair's shoulders stiffened. His ceremonial staff held tighter in his hand. The Valari envoy's eyes narrowed, jaw tightening as he spoke in a clipped dialect. "These are acts of aggression," he said. Durek's expression remained unchanged. "They are acts of record," he replied, each word deliberate. "Agreements honored, not broken. Your fleets blockade our colonies, but our commerce does not answer to your warships." Council whispers rose in volume, an undercurrent of fear that the Council's order might be more fragile than any dared admit. Earth had offered no threats, no show of ships or guns. Only clauses, lines of ink on paper that had become the iron chains of a system built on commerce. Durek's final glance around the chamber was measured. He noted the stiffness in alien shoulders, the way fingers drummed uneasily on data pads. He noted, too, the quiet relief in the eyes of Earth's allies. Minor species who had been dismissed as irrelevant until Earth's leverage raised them into the light. He stood and offered a single, respectful nod to the council chair. Then he turned, the quiet scrape of his boots across the marble floor a statement of its own. Earth's silence had been mistaken for absence. In truth, it was the silence of gears turning beneath the surface, a system shifting not through war but through quiet dominance. As he walked from the chamber, the echoes of his steps carried the unspoken reality. The council had misread Earth's patience for powerlessness. Now, with each quiet nod, each sealed deal, that misjudgment was becoming a lesson, one that would reshape the balance of their entire world. Derek returned to his seat, posture unchanged but every movement around him now sharper, each breath drawn by the council's aides an act of quiet dread. The council chair cleared his throat, the sound small in the heavy air. "The matter of Earth's disruption will be examined," he said, eyes scanning the assembly without conviction. His voice trembled with the weight of a chamber no longer as certain as before. Rows of alien delegates shifted uncomfortably, heads turning toward the faint flicker of council data screens. Each panel glowed with charts that refused to align, the soft light of shifting numbers reflecting in the polished stone walls. Delegates leaned closer, murmuring in clipped dialects. One of the Volari envoys rose, robes trailing like spilled ink across the cold marble. "This is sabotage," he said, words tight as he addressed the council. "Earth's manipulations are acts of war without a single weapon drawn." Durek let the accusation pass without reaction. He noted the cold sweat gathering at the envoy's brow, the nervous tick of a clawed finger tapping the rim of a glass of water. Each small detail was another thread in the tapestry he had spent years weaving. Across the chamber, alien traders in the upper galleries exchanged hushed words, their eyes darting back to the human envoy, seated so calmly amid the growing storm. The council's chief auditor, a squat figure with skin the color of sand, stepped forward. His voice, though low, carried to every ear. "We have traced the source of these trade freezes," he said. "Earth's digital signatures appear in every system, linked through old treaty annexes that were never fully repealed." His words were not an accusation, they were a revelation. The chamber fell into a heavy silence, broken only by the faint hiss of filtered air through the chamber's vent. The Balari envoy's lips curled in disdain. "You speak of signatures as if they are weapons," he spat. "Earth has always hidden behind treaties while we have built fleets and stargates. Words cannot break empires." His hand trembled as he spoke, though he tried to steady it against the railing. Durek's eyes met his, calm, steady, patient. "Empires built on trade are not broken by ships," he said quietly. "Beely are undone by the agreements that sustain them." The council's chair tapped his staff against the marble floor, the single strike like a heartbeat. "Control your claims," he ordered, voice brittle. "This council will not be swayed by fear or speculation." Yet the strain in his posture betrayed his words. Alien traders in the gallery leaned forward, the scent of their ceremonial oils sharp in the recycled air. The tension in the chamber was no longer hidden. It was a living thing, coiling between every word spoken. A Vark delegate adjusted his seat, the sound of sliding wood echoing in the cavernous hall. "What does Earth seek?" he asked, his voice low but steady. "Do you want the council's markets held hostage until your colonies are freed? Or do you aim to tear down everything we have built together?" Durek's reply was measured, each word carrying the weight of Earth's quiet resolve. "We seek the restoration of what is ours," he said. "Nothing more." Council aides scrambled at the edges of the dais, fingers tapping data pads, sweat darkening the edges of their ceremonial sashes. Lines of data scrolled across the screens, numbers that refused to fall into the order the council had once trusted. Each stutter in the graphs was a testament to Earth's quiet mastery of the very systems these delegates had taken for granted. The Volari banners that draped the chamber's rear wall fluttered faintly as the ventilation system stirred the air, a subtle shiver that mirrored the unease in the room. The banners had once been symbols of certainty, each glyph a declaration of power. Now they seemed to droop, their proud colors weighed down by the silent disruption that had spread like a crack in a polished floor. One of the council scribes approached the chair, voice low and urgent. "Counselor, trade convoys from 3 sectors have ceased movement entirely. Their captains report Earth-controlled codes overriding council protocols." The chair's mouth tightened, the lines of age in his face deepening. "Can this be reversed?" he asked, though the question was rhetorical. They all knew the answer. Durek sat motionless, the faintest trace of a smile touching his lips. Calm, not triumphant. Every movement of his eyes captured the room's shifting current, every breath measured. He spoke only when the Volare envoy turned on him fully, voice breaking. "Do you think this will end well for you, human? You think trade routes will keep you safe when fleets fail?" The words were bitter, the final threat of a man who had realized his weapons had grown dull. Durek's tone remained even, as if the alien's rage was a distant echo. "I do not think," he said, voice soft but unwavering. "I know the shape of what we built, and I know what happens when those foundations are challenged." His hand moved to rest on his notebook, fingertips brushing the worn leather cover. Every page within held the record of what Earth had endured, and what it was prepared to reclaim. Alien traders shifted uneasily, the scent of old leather and polished stone filling the chamber's cold air. Each one measured the quiet human presence against the growing weight of frozen accounts and halted convoys. Durek did not need to raise his voice. His silence was the echo that filled the chamber, more powerful than any speech. The council's chair rose slowly, the carved staff trembling slightly in his grasp. "We must deliberate," he said, each word an effort. "The hearings will pause while we consider these revelations." His voice, once the quiet command of an empire, now sounded like an uncertain promise. Durek stood with deliberate calm, closing his notebook with a single, quiet motion. The sound carried across the marble, a soft punctuation that drew every eye. He offered no protest, no demand, only a single look, a reminder that Earth's voice did not need to shout to be heard. As he turned to leave, the council's data screens flickered once more, each line of stuttering light a final testament to the truth no one in the chamber could deny. The gallery fell silent as he passed, alien traders watching with new respect, or perhaps new fear. Outside, freighters hung in the darkness, their captains waiting for the council's word. Inside, the chamber's banners shifted once more, colors dulled by the realization that Earth's quiet leverage had become the council's silent cage. Durek's final glance over his shoulder spoke volumes. Earth had spoken with treaties and trade codes, and the council would listen, whether it wished to or not. The council's chamber sat heavy with the echo of Durek's steps, the scrape of his boots across the marble floor a cold answer to every smug smile that had followed Earth's silence. The air carried the faint tang of polished stone and the sharp note of alien incense, each breath tasting of distant worlds and centuries of ceremonial grandeur. Alien ambassadors adjusted their robes with quiet satisfaction, their expressions mirroring the finality they expected from this hearing. The council chair lifted his staff, voice low and formal. "Earth's observer's status does not confer the right to challenge the Volare occupation," he declared. His words settled over the chamber like a final seal, the smug certainty of those who believed they still controlled every lever of power. Around him, aides resumed their tasks, heads bent over data streams that flickered with numbers now locked in place by the council's decree. Durek listened, his face unreadable, as the chair continued. "No formal claim has been lodged. No military challenge has been presented. The council finds Earth's claims inadmissible and will proceed to recognize Volare sovereignty." The finality of the statement hung in the air, the weight of law spoken with ceremonial gravity. The banners above the dais shimmered softly in the filtered light, their glyphs proud and unmoving. For a heartbeat, silence reigned. Then Durek stood. The scrape of his chair against the floor drew every eye. Alien delegates leaned forward, the faint rustle of fabric and the subtle creak of old wood echoing through the hall. He stepped forward, his movements measured, each step marking a new rhythm in the council's ancient dance. His hand moved to the fold of his coat, drawing out a single folded document. The paper, marked with the seal of Earth's diplomatic corps, seemed almost insignificant in the grandeur of the council's chamber. He approached the dais, placing the document carefully before the chair. "Directive 88G, he said. His voice carried no emotion, but the sound of it broke through the quiet arrogance that had filled the room. The council staff tapped once in reply, but the chair's hand had grown stiff on its carved length, knuckles white as he regarded the single page. "Is this?" the Velari envoy demanded, voice tight as he rose from his seat. His eyes flicked over the document as if it might vanish if he looked away. "Another report? Another plea for mercy?" Durek met his gaze without blinking. "It is Earth's final position," he said, "and the invocation of Clause Aegis." The word settled over the chamber with a weight no fleet could match. Council aides glanced at one another, the quiet clatter of datapads now frantic as they scrambled to cross-section a clause most had believed was buried in the endless annexes of council law. Durek's fingers rested lightly on the edge of the document, the rough texture of the paper grounding him in the moment. Each breath he drew tasted of old dust and the faint sweetness of alien spice drifting through the air. The chair's voice, once steady, cracked as he read the first lines of the directive aloud. Clause Aegis, nullification of council decisions in the event of trade-based destabilization. His voice trailed off as he scanned the signatures at the bottom. 37 co-signatories from minor species, whose names were never spoken in the council's grand decrees, but whose economies Earth had nurtured quietly for decades. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Alien ambassadors shifted in their seats, the subtle scents of their homeworlds, oils, dried herbs, faint traces of unfamiliar flora mixing in the recycled air. "This is impossible," one counselor whispered. "No single envoy could. No single world could." Durek's eyes held each one of them in turn, the calm in his gaze more final than any shout. The Velari envoy stepped forward, face flushed dark beneath the crest of his headgear. "This is a stunt," he snapped, voice straining to break the quiet authority in Durek's presence. "The council will not be dictated to by an observer's paper." Durek did not move. His reply was measured, each word placed with the care of a man who had waited years to speak them. "This is not a stunt," he said. "It is the culmination of every treaty you signed and every agreement you chose to ignore. The council's word is only as strong as the trust it commands. That trust was yours to keep. You chose to discard it." The room fell silent, each alien's breath shallow, every eye on the single sheet of paper that had become a blade against their collective certainty. The flicker of the council's data screens caught the edge of the document, lines of light tracing the signatures, like an oath given in secret. The council chair cleared his throat, though his voice no longer carried the easy confidence of an empire that believed it could not be questioned. "We will consider this," he said, the words stripped of their usual ceremony. Around him the aides shifted uneasily, their fingers moving in small, nervous patterns across their datapads. Earth's allies, once overshadowed in these halls, sat with heads high. The weight of their signatures behind Durek gave form to an alliance that had never needed Earth's ships, only its quiet promise of mutual survival. One by one, their envoys gave small nods, each a silent affirmation of Earth's demand that this chamber would never be the same again. Durek's final words were quiet, yet they cut through the air with a finality no decree could smother. "The law was your creation," he said. "Earth has only ensured it remains more than ink on paper." He stepped back, the soft shuffle of his boots the only sound as he resumed his seat. The document remained on the dais, a single page that had become the weight of Earth's entire voice. The council's chair lowered his eyes, the polished staff now a burden in his hands rather than a symbol of power. Alien traders in the galleries leaned forward, eyes bright with the knowledge that something fundamental had shifted in the air around them. The Velari envoy's shoulders slumped as he turned back to his seat. his robes whispering across the cold marble. His voice, when he spoke, was a hollow thing. "This is not how power was meant to be tested," he said. Durek did not reply. His silence was no longer the stillness of an overlooked observer. It was the quiet certainty of a world that had chosen its weapons carefully and wielded them without a single wasted word. Above the chamber, the council's banners seemed to droop, their colors dulled by the simple finality of Earth's directive. Each flicker of light from the data screens, each whisper in the chamber's cool air, became a testament to the truth that could no longer be denied. Earth had spoken, and the council would answer. The chamber shifted from noise to a hush so complete that even the distant footsteps of a single aide paused at the threshold. The council's chair cleared his throat, but the sound was swallowed by the air around him, each breath colder than the polished stone underfoot. His eyes scanned the document again, hands stiff, fingers gripping the carved staff that no longer offered comfort. "Directive 88G verified," he said at last, his voice thin, the weight of the centuries, old chamber pressing down on every syllable. Galari envoys rose as one, robes brushing the edges of their seats. "This cannot stand," one snapped, his voice high and sharp as he faced the council's dais. "This directive has no precedent." His hands trembled, the motion at odds with the defiance in his tone. Durek watched, expression unchanging, his gaze fixed on the envoy's face, as if measuring the man's resolve against the truth that now filled the room. The chair tried to find a point of order, lifting his staff once, the polished end tapping softly against the marble. "Envoy Durek," he said, the title spoken with forced respect. "The council demands clarification. On whose authority was this clause invoked?" Durek answered in the same steady cadence that had carried him through every slight Earth had endured, the authority of those who depend on Earth's trade. 37 co-signatories, each confirming the threat to stability if these terms are ignored. A council aide at the edge of the dais scrolled through data logs, fingers tapping frantically, sweat beading along his brow. "Confirmed," he said, voice small. "Earth's network touches every trade lane. Their control exceeds 60% of freight tracking, no route untouched." The admission left the council reeling. Alien delegates exchanged quick glances, the subtle scent of fear cutting through the old perfumes and incense that had clung to these halls for centuries. Galari envoys leaned in, voices dropping to heated whispers, their language a hiss of vowels and guttural stops. One turned to Durek, his tone a quiet challenge. "You wield trade as a blade, yet you call it peace." Durek met the envoy's eyes without flinching. "You mistake peace for weakness," he said, each word measured and deliberate. "Trade is not a blade, it is the structure that holds your world together, and it is Earth's hand that steadies that structure, not yours." Alien traders in the gallery exchanged quick, uneasy glances. Their lives were woven into the lines of commerce Earth now held. Some shifted in their seats, the faint squeak of worn leather and the quiet shift of fabric echoing in the high dome of the chamber. Eyes turned back to Durek, seeking the measure of the man who spoke for a world they had dismissed as quiet. Valari representatives refused to yield. One, taller than the others, stepped forward, his breath short, shoulders stiff. "Earth's silence was your only virtue," he said, voice low and dangerous. "Break it now, and you break the balance of this council." Durek's reply was unhurried, his tone unchanged. "Silence was never our virtue," he said calmly. "It was your comfort. Ours was the labor of treaties, the work of trade that you never saw because you never looked beyond your own grandeur." Council aides shifted papers across long tables, the soft crackle of data pads and the dry rasp of parchment forming a counterpoint to the steady calm in Durek's voice. Each flicker of a screen revealed the shape of Earth's hidden leverage, transponder codes that formed a web no fleet could pierce. Each glance at those figures was a quiet confirmation that Earth had spoken not in threats but in absolute certainty. The council's chair leaned forward, his staff resting across the edge of the dais. "Envoy Durek," he said, voice trembling with a formality that felt hollow now, You have made your position clear. Do you offer any terms for negotiation? Durek's answer came without hesitation. The order stands, he said, voice calm as ever. Compliance is non-negotiable. Earth's networks will not resume until the Volari fleets withdraw and our colonies are restored. Silence met his words. The chamber felt smaller, as if the air itself had drawn closer, each breath more deliberate, every movement measured against the gravity of the moment. Volari envoys faltered, their hands opening and closing, seeking arguments that would not come. Around them, delegates of lesser worlds sat straighter, the realization settling into their bones that the Council's strength had been an illusion. Earth's quiet hand had dismantled without firing a shot. One of the alien traders in the gallery leaned forward, his voice carrying softly across the cold air. And if the Council refuses? He asked. The question simple, the weight behind it immense. Durek's eyes turned to him, the faintest trace of a nod given in reply. Then every world tied to Earth's trade will feel the cost, he said. Not by Earth's will, but by the terms you chose to forget. The words were not a threat. They were a statement of consequence, spoken without malice or pride. Durek did not raise his voice, he did not need to. His calm had become an eerie void in the room. A quiet that stripped the Council of its illusions and left only the cold fact of Earth's control. The chair closed his eyes for a long moment, shoulders slumping beneath the weight of what he could not deny. When he looked up again, the proud bearing of his office was gone, replaced by the tired eyes of a man who understood the finality of what had just been placed before him. The Council will deliberate, he said. Each word spoken softly, as if the sound itself might shatter the last remnants of their pride. Durek gave a small nod, the faintest movement of acknowledgement. He stepped back from the dais, his boots striking the marble floor with a finality that needed no embellishment. Alien tablets flickered weakly in the fading light, data streams confirming what no Council decree could unmake. In the upper galleries, traders leaned forward, the quiet certainty of Earth's dominance pressing against every breath they took. Volari envoys gathered their robes around them like armor, but the stiffness in their shoulders betrayed the truth that words had never before forced them to bow. Durek stood in the center of that quiet storm, every line of his posture speaking of a world that had turned every slight and every dismissal into the quiet power that now silenced an empire. The chamber's final sound was the soft exhale of air from the vents above, the cold breath of the hall itself as it settled into a new shape. A shape defined not by Council decrees, but by Earth's quiet command. Durek's stillness became the last word spoken that day, a presence that carried the final weight of what had been won, without a single shot fired. The Council's chair lowered his staff onto the dais with a soft crack, the sound a quiet plea for order rather than a command. Durek waited, his breath steady, the distant scent of polished stone mixing with the cold air that seeped through the chamber's ancient stones. He raised the document in his hand, voice clear and even as he began to speak. Earth's terms for the resolution of this dispute are final and binding, he said, the calm authority of each word cutting through the low mutters of dissent. Volari envoys bristled, their eyes narrowing as they shifted in their seats. You presume to dictate terms here? One growled, his voice a coarse scrape against the Council's careful decorum. Durek did not flinch. This is not presumption, he said quietly. It is the enforcement of agreements your own signatures placed into law. His eyes swept the chamber, the weight of the treaties behind him pressing against every breath drawn by those who listened. He read the first term aloud, his voice a steady rhythm in the cold air. Immediate withdrawal of all Volari fleets from human-affiliated systems. All military presence will be removed within 3 standard days. The words were plain, without threat or flourish, yet they carried the gravity of a world no longer willing to be brushed aside. The Volari delegate barked a protest in his native tongue, the harsh syllables cutting across the chamber's hushed air. Durek waited for the sound to fade, then continued in the same measured tone. Second, full restoration of data links and transport lines to all human colonies disrupted by this blockade. The Council's own trade regulations demand this. He paused, eyes narrowing slightly as he met the gaze of the Valari envoy. Your fleets have not simply occupied worlds, they have disrupted every colony that trusted in this Council's guarantees. Whispers rippled along the rows of alien traders, the soft shift of bodies and the quiet hiss of breath filling the spaces between Durek's words. A representative from a minor species leaned forward, his eyes bright with the realization that these demands did not come from a place of conquest, but of enforced stability. Durek moved to the final term, the page in his hand steady, fingers tracing the inked lines as if drawing strength from every word. Lastly, a formal apology from the Valari Assembly to every Terran civilian whose life was endangered by these actions. His voice, calm and unwavering, echoed across the cold stone, each word a weight that the Council could not ignore. The Valari envoy's face flushed, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. You demand contrition from us as if we were children caught in mischief, he said, his voice rising. We are not bound by your guilt or your need for petty vindication. Durek's eyes flickered with a spark of steel. You are bound by the treaties you signed, he said, and by the stability this Council was built to protect. The Council's aides bent over their data pads, fingers darting across screens, eyes wide as they watched the shifting numbers of Earth's trade web tighten around the Council's throat. One of them looked up, voice tight. Transponder networks confirm Earth's hold. Entire routes, frozen. The chair's shoulders slumped, his staff resting against the dais with a quiet finality. The room smelled of old ink and stone, the scent of ancient halls now filled with the sharp tang of quiet defeat. Minor species envoys began to speak, voices soft but unified. We support these terms, one said, the weight of decades of quiet alliances lending his words strength. Another rose, his robe a simple cloth, worn thin by years of overlooked diplomacy. Earth stood for us when your fleets would not, he said, his voice calm. We stand for them now. Valari envoys exchanged quick glances, the pride in their bearing cracking under the steady calm of Earth's demands. One stepped forward, his voice tight with disbelief. You speak of alliances, he said, his fingers trembling as they gripped the edge of his seat. Yet your people have no ships in these halls, no fleets in orbit. You stand alone. Durek's reply was a simple truth, each word chosen like a blade in a duel. We have no fleets in these halls, he said softly. We do not need them. The systems you depend on already belong to Earth's quiet agreements. The Council's chair lifted his staff once more, but his voice was a faint echo of what it had been. You leave no room for negotiation, he asked. Durek's head tilted slightly, the light catching the edge of his gaze. The room for negotiation ended when you chose to silence Earth's voice, he said. Now you hear it in the laws you wrote, and in the silence of every ship that will not sail until these terms are met. A hush fell across the chamber. The alien banners overhead, once proud in their static grace, seemed to waver, the heavy cloth shifting with the breath of the assembled councilors. The ceremonial gavel in the chair's hand tapped once, the sound a hollow echo against the cold floor. The Council will honor Earth's terms, he said finally, each word spoken slowly, as if drawing them from a place he had never imagined he would stand. Durek's eyes met his, and in that quiet gaze was the calm triumph of a world that had never sought to dominate, only to be heard. He gave a single nod, the finality of it ringing louder than any shouted order. Around the room, the minor envoys stood taller, the soft rustle of fabric and the scent of old incense rising in the chill air. The Valari envoy lowered his head, his breath a quiet surrender. Durek closed the document. The crisp sound of paper on paper, the last note of Earth's decree. He stepped back from the dais, each footfall measured, the cool stone firm beneath him. In that silence, Earth's demand was no longer a challenge. It was the new shape of order itself. The chamber had never been so still. The Council's chair rose slowly from his seat, each movement deliberate, the carved staff in his grasp no longer a symbol of unshakable power but a weight he carried with measured solemnity. His voice, when he spoke, carried the echo of centuries of tradition, but none of the certainty it once held. "The Council recognizes Earth's authority in this matter," he said, his words halting yet final. "The Valari claims are reversed by unanimous decree." A murmur ran through the delegates, the quiet brush of breath and the low rustle of fabric against polished seats. Durek stood motionless, his back straight, the leather-bound notebook at his side like an extension of his resolve. Across the chamber, alien envoys shifted uneasily, the air thick with the scent of ceremonial oils and the faint tang of tension that could not be voiced. The chair lowered his head. "Valari fleets are to withdraw from human systems," he continued, the words spoken slowly, each one a step away from the arrogance that had filled this hall only hours before. "Data lines to be restored, reparations to be recognized. Earth's seat shall be amended to enforcement authority, with veto power in future hearings." The statement carried the weight of an empire that had discovered its voice, had become an echo. The Lari envoys rose as a single unit, the hard set of their jaws betrayed by the flicker of doubt in their eyes. One turned, robes brushing the marble, and spoke in a low voice that held more resignation than challenge. "We comply," he said, the words falling with the quiet finality of a curtain drawn at the end of a play. "Our fleets will stand down within the stated time. Earth's terms accepted." The council aides recorded each word, fingers flying across data pads, the soft tapping of screens and the faint scratch of stylus on parchment the only sounds in the cold air. The tension that had once gripped the chamber now settled into something else, a quiet acknowledgement of a new order. Durek watched without expression, the lines around his mouth unchanged, his breath steady as he marked each admission and concession. Outside the council hall, ships began to turn, data relays blinking back to life in distant orbits. Valari warships, their hulls once symbols of power, shifted course with the silent obedience of a fleet that no longer had a cause. Star charts updated in real time, bright lines of commerce routes opening, as Earth's quiet demands were met without a single shot fired. A minor species ambassador rose from his seat, his eyes steady as he spoke. "Earth's place among us is no longer that of a quiet observer," he said, the words spoken with the weight of someone who had watched from the shadows for too long. "Today, it is the silent spine of the order we have all claimed to uphold." Earth inclined his head, the gesture simple but profound. "Earth does not seek dominion," he said calmly, his voice cutting through the chill of the marble walls. "Only the respect that is given when the law is honored, and the work of many worlds is not wasted by the greed of one." His words were not a threat, but they carried the cold finality of someone who had waited long enough to be heard. The council's chair laid his staff across the dais, the polished wood resting against the ancient stone. "This matter is concluded," he said, his voice quiet but resolute. "Earth's demands are not a conquest. They are a restoration of balance. The Council's judgment stands amended. Let it be recorded." He looked down at the document in Durek's hand, the single sheet that had reshaped an empire's certainty. "We will not forget this day." Valari envoys gathered their robes, the soft whisper of heavy cloth the only sign of their retreat. They filed from the chamber in silence, the sound of their steps lost beneath the quiet breathing of those left behind. Outside the hall, their ships were already turning, the slow drift of withdrawal written in the starlight of every display in every port. Earth's allies, once overshadowed by the towering arrogance of the Council's oldest empires, stood taller. Each breath they took now carried the quiet pride of those who had seen Earth's patience rewarded, their own survival written into the terms of the day. The air smelled of old parchment and the faint trace of fresh ink, the weight of signatures and silent deals made real in a single afternoon. Durek remained still, his notebook closed, the worn leather warm against his fingers. He did not raise it in triumph, nor did he let his gaze linger on the bowed heads of those who had once dismissed his world. The silence that filled the hall was enough, a silence that spoke not of weakness, but of a new shape to the order, that had once tried to erase Earth's place among the stars. The council's chair spoke one last time, his voice softer now, the iron certainty of his office replaced by the quiet dignity of a man who understood the moment. "Envoy Durek," he said, each word measured, "Earth's seat shall bear the name of enforcement. Your veto is recognized, your authority noted." He paused, as if searching for the right words to honor the weight of what had been done. Earth has earned this place, not by force, but by the unwavering patience of those who remember every promise made in these halls. Durek's reply was a nod, nothing more. He did not ask for celebration. He did not seek the hollow victory of titles. He gathered his notebook, the finality of the motion echoing the quiet triumph that settled into every corner of the room. As he turned to leave, alien eyes followed him, the weight of every whispered slight and every overlooked alliance now reshaped into a respect no one could deny. Outside, the data relays pulsed softly, their glow steady, each flicker a promise that the world had shifted. The old order had not been broken by war. It had been unmade by Earth's refusal to let silence be mistaken for surrender. Durek's steps across the marble floor carried that truth, each stride a final echo of a world that had claimed its place through quiet, unwavering resolve. Durek walked through the council's great archway, the cold stone beneath his feet a final echo of the authority he had claimed not in battle, but in the quiet insistence of Earth's voice. Each step marked the end of an era, the gentle brush of his coat's hem along the marble, the only sound left in the grand hall. His leather-bound notebook rested in his hand, pages closed, the silent record of a world that no longer needed to ask permission. The council's chair watched him go, staff lowered against the dais, eyes distant. Around the chamber, delegates shifted in their seats, the air heavy with the scent of old incense and the weight of memory. Alien voices rose in hushed tones, questions left unspoken hanging in the stillness. Each diplomat knew that Earth had not simply claimed a seat that day. It had redrawn the very lines of power they had believed unchangeable. A historian from the Tashari Collective watched with a careful eye, his hand moving across the smooth face of a data slate. "This will be recorded," he murmured, voice low as he glanced at Durek's retreating figure. Earth rose without a fleet. It rose without a shot. That will be remembered long after these walls have crumbled. In distant starports, Valari colonies reconnected with Earth's trade relays, the quiet pulse of data streams shifting back into place. Each relay flickered to life with an ease that belied the weeks of blockade, as if the years of trust Earth had banked were enough to set every route moving again. A Valari officer stood on a landing pad, his face shadowed by the ship's hull as he watched human transport craft slip back into lanes his empire had once claimed for itself. "We thought them weak," he said under his breath, his voice ragged. "They were only waiting." Inside the council hall, the banners of every world still hung from the high beams, their colors bright against the pale stone, yet they no longer carried the same quiet arrogance. The Valari standard hung limp, no longer a mark of conquest but a symbol of the day Earth's patience became the council's reckoning. One of the alien scribes reached out to steady it, his fingers pausing as if he felt the weight of that memory in the heavy cloth. Durek paused at the doorway, turning for one final glance at the chamber that had once judged Earth as nothing more than an observer. His eyes moved over each face, every diplomat, every aide, every silent witness who had seen the truth written not in battlefields, but in ledgers and legal codices Earth had guarded for generations. The quiet in the room was no longer a slight. It was a mark of respect, or perhaps of fear. A junior aide to the council chair leaned forward, his voice uncertain. "Will they return?" he asked, the question small but urgent. The chair's gaze never wavered as he answered. "They will not need to," he said, his voice heavy with the finality of that knowledge. "Earth has said what needed to be said, and the galaxy will hear it in every shipment, every signature, on every trade accord that followed." As Durek walked away, his footsteps muffled against the thick stone, the council's data logs updated with the first full transmission of Earth's final terms. Each line of code, each quiet confirmation of compliance was another thread in a web no warship could break. Outside, The transponder arrays glowed with steady purpose. No single envoy could erase it now. In the council's antechamber, minor species ambassadors gathered, their voices low, words spoken with newfound confidence. "They are not conquerors," one said. "They are the architects of every treaty we once dismissed as old parchment. That power will not fade." His companion, a thin-limbed delegate with eyes like polished obsidian, nodded. "Nor will we forget who taught us to stand," he replied, the pride in his voice a quiet defiance of centuries of quiet dismissal. Beyond the council's walls, the galaxy's trade lanes moved with a quiet order. The routes opened not by war, but by the careful promise of Earth's networks. Valari warships turned for home, their hulls no longer the final word in disputes that had once been settled by force. Each retreating vessel left behind a silence that spoke more clearly than any council ruling. Earth had not shouted, yet every port in every system carried its quiet decree. The historian from the Tasheri Collective paused at the edge of the chamber, his finger still on the data slate. "It will be known," he said to no one in particular, his voice a soft vow, "that Earth's voice was not in the thunder of guns, but in the simple lines of commerce and trust." The council chair heard him, the faintest flicker of something like relief or regret crossing his face. As the last of the delegates filed out, the hall returned to its quiet routine, petitions read, disputes weighed. But each speaker paused before they said Earth's name, as if to taste the memory of this day on their tongue before they dared to speak it. No declaration of future alliances, no promise of new treaties, could erase the lesson that had been laid bare in the council's own words. Durek stepped into the corridor beyond, the cold air a balm on his skin, the steady breath he drew tasting of clean stone and the faint hint of something sweet. Flowers blooming somewhere beyond the city's old walls. He paused, his notebook tucked against his side, the final act of a man who had no need to linger. He had come to remind them of Earth's place. And he had succeeded. In the council's records, the session was marked as complete. In the memory of every world that traded and bartered for survival, it would never truly end. The myth of Earth's weakness had been buried in the quiet of that chamber, replaced by the simple truth that the quietest voice in the room had always been the one that shaped its final words. As Durek walked away, the council's great doors closed behind him with a soft hiss of ancient hydraulics, the seal a final note of closure. There would be other disputes, other councils, but the balance had been redrawn, and in the quiet order of commerce and law, Earth's presence would be felt in every line, every echo that followed. Not as conquerors, but as the final word no fleet could deny. The myth of Earth's frailty was gone, and in its place a new truth, carved in silence, carried in every breath of the council's next session, would stand forever. Earth had spoken, the council had listened, and the galaxy would never be the same. Do you think patience and strategy can always outmaneuver brute force? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Like and subscribe for upcoming stories.